If you don't hire CMO and you only hire executional team, then you don't have leadership. So really you're buying my time to save you a lot of money and mistakes. Marketing's job is to make complex ideas simple. So I'll start off with some simple ideas. The key theme is that we're all lazy. Then if we look at our marketing materials, what are we doing to make sure that a lazy person can understand that? The complex problem is the fact that whoever we're talking to is being inundated by decisions. If we don't package whatever we are selling in such a way where someone can make immediate and comfortable decisions, we are essentially hindering their capability to make a good choice. A lot of organizations get wrong. They get really tied down on the fact that KPIs are static, and they are not. You don't generally try to throw $1 million into a feature without knowing if there's any product market fit. I've been telling a lot of companies that I think content is no longer king.
So speaking about being a fractional CMO, what inspired you to take the path of a fractional CMO, and how does this model benefit mid-market businesses compared to a full-time in-house marketing team?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason I took the fractional CMO role is I just recognized that a chief marketing officer isn't fully utilized to its highest capabilities for a lot of organizations because there generally isn't actually enough work. At the same time, you need someone with that expertise to lead the function. And what was just evident when I was working as a management consultant was in a lot of companies, you kind of need sprints essentially. So a CMO is there to set the sprint, and then ultimately the CMO should be at the end and kind of like sometimes, obviously maintaining and reviewing the work, but they don't really need to be full-time after the sprint has already started. And so I think it's a function of a lot of businesses where you have to be cost conscious and also maximize your team members to their highest and best value. So if you hire a CMO and then you can't hire any of your executional team, well, that's kind of silly. And then if you don't hire a CMO and you only hire executional team, then you don't have leadership. And that's where I think fractional has become such a big thing, because I think a lot of organizations are starting to recognize the highest and best value of fractional executives works better. Sometimes you don't need a full-time CFO. You don't need a full-time CTO. And often they're more related around sprints. So that's how I came to the whole fractional CMO perspective. And why would this be beneficial for any business? It's like, well, a lot of businesses probably have not practiced as many marketing tactics, strategies, or funnels as I have. And less likely have they done so across multiple industries to understand the nuances amongst industries. So I always walk through my clients that every marketing tactic is really constrained by kind of a couple different things. One, it's like human capital, like what expertise do you have internally to execute? Two is time. How much time do you have in order for you to see like a result? So if you're a venture capital, funded business, it's kind of short. If you're, well cashed up, then you have time. And then it's financial capital. How much money can you invest? And given those three, right? And then finally the ICP, like where can you actually, address those ICP? That really cuts down the world of marketing tactics. And my job being the marketing expert is to provide you the highest probability path of success, which I know through experience and through data. And it's not likely a small business owner or a startup bootstrapper at the age of 25 is going to have that exact same experience. So really, you're buying my time to save you a lot of money and mistakes.
B2B SaaS marketing, what are the key differences in marketing strategies for SaaS companies compared to other industries you've worked in, such as finance or healthcare?
So I'll give the big one that I'll start off with, and it wasn't that the finance or healthcare, but finance and healthcare, I will say, is compliance. Finance and healthcare have far more compliance than some other industries. I was literally just on a call with an insurance broker, and we have to deal with very strict requirements, privacy requirements. In healthcare in Canada, we have HIPAA compliance that we have to worry about. So I would say in certain categories, you're dealing with a lot more government risk and government things that you have to follow. So that constraint. So again, going back to market constraints on the ICPs, typically there are constraints that we have to be very mindful of. And some of these constraints come with some significant penalties. So obviously very important to stay with that. One of the big differences I like to always contrast is B2B and B2C. It's always the big question. Everyone goes, it's vastly different. I will argue it's not actually vastly different, but I will say there is one big differentiator between the two that can happen sometimes, but far more often in B2C. B2B versus B2C. B2C has something that I call, or has been coined as, observability. Observability is the ability for anyone in public space to actually view and see that someone is using your product. I joke about this in a lot of my lectures and my keynotes. I go, put up your hand if anyone here knows their friends, families, or competitors' ERP system. And maybe one or two people will put up their hand. And that's simply because no one goes out promoting their stack. No one goes out to a conference and wears a t-shirt saying, I use Salesforce. Now, mind you, they probably do in some places, but no one's talking about their CRM publicly, openly, on a daily basis. In B2C, because consumers typically either consuming that product or using that product on a daily basis, there's a lot of observability, and people forget how much of a multiplier that is, which is why in B2B, it's so much more important to do marketing, because you don't have that distribution point. You don't have that natural frequency of your brand being shown on a day-to-day basis.
Pivoting to consumer psychology, you mentioned on your LinkedIn that you're a consumer psychology geek. How do you incorporate insights from consumer behavior into B2B marketing strategies to drive revenue?
Awesome. I like to say that, marketing's job is to make complex ideas simple. So I'll start off with some simple ideas. In consumer psychology, especially in the book I'm authoring right now, there's a key theme in that book. And the key theme is that we're all lazy. And I think it's really important that if we want to incorporate this idea of that I've kind of found through all my research, indicating that if everyone is lazy, then if we look at our marketing materials, what are we doing to make sure that a lazy person can understand that? And what I'm really doing is I'm oversimplifying a very complex problem. The complex problem is the fact that whoever we're talking to is being inundated by decisions, right? The decision to leave their desk to go for a walk, the decision to have a Coke versus a tea, the decision between having a banana bread or a healthy loaf. Like, we are inundated with decisions. And the reality as a marketer, if we don't package whatever we are selling in such a way where someone can make immediate and comfortable decisions, we are essentially hindering their capability to make a good choice. And when we hinder someone from making a good choice, they don't like it. They don't feel good about it, and they typically shy away from it. There's friction. We're causing friction. So that's a great example of where I use, I use all of my consumer psychology research. I've dumbed it down to a very simple concept. But if you look at people as they are lazy and you look at your marketing, you ask yourself, am I making this lazy friendly? Am I making this for someone who is lazy, easy to consume? And if you say no, you have a problem. You have to relook at your marketing. And that comes down to your creative, your messaging, your features, how you can access any of your materials. You got to make sure it's as low friction as possible.
And in your research, have you found some answers or possibilities for why we're lazy? As I also have noticed this phenomenon, and I mean, at first it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. Like, it seems like things are more well thought out, and then you realize, like, oh, we're just repeating like a lot of what we heard. We're not doing due diligence to actually see if it's factual. And I mean, it kind of makes sense to be too much. Otherwise, we'd only have like one thought a day, because that's how much work it takes to like check it out. I thought maybe it was like trying to conserve calories. Do you have any kind of insights there?
Yeah, I think there's definitely two things. I think via nature, via how we are built as humans, we are there to conserve energy, right? And that's essentially we're built for that, because in survival mode, the goal is to conserve energy. And we do that also in our decision making. We conserve energy when we make decisions. So if we have a predisposed belief, whether that predisposed belief is actually fundamentally supported by something, it's your belief. You will try to support that belief, or you will make shortcuts to support that belief. So if you feel like you need that Chanel bag, you will make it such as such, right? And you will just justify that purchase. And so that's just like innate human evolution. Like, that's just who we are as humans. In terms of like society, I think what ends up happening is going back to this whole idea that we have constraints. We as people have constraints. We do not have infinite time. We do not have infinite cash. And because of that, we have to rely on shortcuts to make decisions. But we're relying on those shortcuts to make decisions to make ourselves feel better, right? because the idea of making a poor decision is not something someone wants to do. So the reality is that not only is it a conservation of energy thing, it's also an ego thing, in the sense that we want to make ourselves feel good. We don't want to put ourselves in a fight or flight like feeling purposely by making a poor decision, right? You don't go to that left turn lane and gun it because you want to feel risky. You take your time to make that decision, but you still only have a limited amount of time. And then sooner or later, you have to make that left turn. When you have to make a purchase, when you have to make a decision, it's the same thing. Sooner or later, you have to make that decision. And sometimes you may not have all the information, but you will have enough and you'll justify it enough to make that decision.
Speaking of cross functional leadership, you've led diverse teams of marketing managers, designers, media buyers, and freelancers, and more. How do you foster collaboration between these diverse teams and ensure that they align towards common marketing goals?
Great question. And I think that has to come down to like really solid visionary messaging via the C suite. I think if you're an organization and you can't tell your team members who you want to be and how you want to win in a market in very simple terms, you're not going to have a unified vision. And if you don't have a unified vision, you're going to have a hard time unifying them around marketing objectives. And that comes down to, again, I think in marketing, we like and we do a very good job of oversimplifying complex problems. This is for a very good reason, because if we can't oversimplify a complex vision into something that is simple, it is not accessible and available. And if it's not accessible and available to people, people can't be mindful of that every time they do something at work. So you got to make it memorable. And by making it memorable, you got to make it simple. And that's why, most people always say, well, the best marketing is the most simple marketing. Well, yes and no. It is, because you can remember it. And hopefully that simplification of that complex idea is done so that simple concept does capture a lot of that complexity. Often it doesn't, but it does just enough that the memorability, the accessibility, the availability outweighs the cost of some of those nuances in a complex view.
What are some marketing KPIs that you find most important for mid-market companies, and how do you go about measuring and optimizing them over time?
That's a great question. And I think this is the one thing that a lot of organizations get wrong. They get really tied down on the fact that KPIs are static, and they are not. KPIs are static based on the maturity of your function. And that means when you start the function, you start with very basic things: impressions, click-through rates, clicks, time on site, engagement, and then form fills. Once you start getting a lot of form fills, you're moving from form fills to conversion rates. Once you're getting to conversion rates, then you're getting conversion rates to how fast are they actually becoming customers. Once you get that, then you're looking at total acquisition cost and lifetime value. Once you start looking at that, then it's only going to be lifetime value stuff. So I think what ends up happening is a lot of organizations go in and go, well, I want MQLs. It's like, well, you're too early in the funnel to measure MQLs. You're not even getting leads yet. We can't even get there. So if we're not getting clicks, we're not getting MQLs. So I think a lot of mid-market companies need to be cognizant that sometimes, which is why you hire someone like myself, is you go in and you pigeonhole the marketing function with the wrong KPIs because you've heard it on some Neil Patel blog or some shiny object thing that's been on LinkedIn. The reality is KPIs, especially for marketing funnels, change based on the maturity of the function. If it's an early function, something that is young and not mature in your organization, you're looking at top of funnel stuff. If you're very mature, then you're looking at full funnel. If you're on the way to the bottom of the funnel, you're looking at mid funnel. And all of these KPIs are very different. Sure, you can try to capture all of them, but what I am trying to say is that if you're going to be riding your marketing team for a KPI goal, you have to ride it based on the maturity of that function, which means you can't be going to them saying, hey, we need to have a CAC ratio or a lifetime value of a certain client at XYZ. If you don't even have those numbers, it's not possible. But you can tell them, hey, I need at least 1,000 clicks and I want 5% conversion CTR rates, because that implies that we have a good landing page. That's fair. but you can't just drive into the end goals.
Can you share some common marketing challenges you've encountered and how you overcame them to optimize operations for your clients?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. SEO, we have clients that literally sit there for hours on end, optimizing content for no good reason. You take the CEO, the CFO, your SMEs, your technical experts, and you all write an article, and that article, in terms of value, will become like $5,000 worth of people's time, and you'll post it, and it'll rank like maybe 15th on second page, and I'll look at them and I'll be like, why did you do that? Like, the reality is you're spending far too much on something that you don't even know is a funnel yet. This maybe works for organizations that already have built out content funnels, but if you're not, the better approach is throw as many decent articles as you can and re-optimize when you know they're ranking. It's kind of like no building than building a product. You don't throw $1 million. Now, mind you, OpenAI is a different story. But you don't generally try to throw $1 million into a feature without knowing if there's any product market fit. And once you get some product market fit, then you invest further. SEO should be the same thing. This is a great concept of where people have spotlight syndrome. And spotlight syndrome is like, oh my God, if I post an article that's not very good, people are going to be scared of me. They're not going to buy my services. Well, the fact of the matter is no one's going to your website anyway. So why does that even matter? Right? So it's like, this concept of, oh, we got to spend everyone's time to make this perfect article doesn't really make sense, because it's not like you have 1,000 people visiting your website. You're not the daily homepage for 99% of your market. So what exactly are you worried about?
You need to iterate more to get more data before you discover what to focus on. Is that right?
100%.
You've managed over $1 million in annual digital media spending across multiple platforms. Which digital channels are you seeing the most ROI from it this year in 2024? And how has this evolved in recent years?
So I still think in general, and I say this again because I think every industry has its nuances. Pay-per-click has always remained relatively stable. I will say pay-per-click this year, though, we're seeing some shakiness. And I think, truthfully, and I kind of called this in earlier, I think that's because of generative models. Generative models is, and I don't know the outcome yet, will be likely the next source of leads.
SEO plays a key role in many of your strategies. How do you stay ahead of algorithm updates and maintain a successful SEO content strategy across both on-site and outbound efforts?
So on-site, I think, is best practices at the end of the day. On-site is really easy. Look, I think SEO in general is really easy, because if you simplify it to, is my page signaling on a data perspective to a third party that I'm interested, and am I answering what I think the user wants? If you look at it just on those two perspectives, you basically have SEO. There are some technical things like interlinking that are a little bit less obvious, but at the end of the day, if you just look at it in the sense of, are the metrics to a third party indicating as if my website is good, which means time on site, engagement, depth, scroll depth, all that kind of stuff. And then, is my page actually answering the question? And if you have those two, you can kind of forecast what happens with SEO. So originally, back in the day when there was not that much data, backlinks was the way to say, hey, this website is pretty valuable. Now it's very much engagement and time on site. So I think really what it is it's about what on a website can signal these things that not everyone else is doing. And I think that's how you start thinking the next step of SEO, which is why I've been telling a lot of companies that I think content is no longer king, because I think it's a attribute of SEO that I think people are very capable of doing now. And so it's not missing the mark as much. What is becoming harder is UI, UX, and creating a better user experience for your user. And if you do that, that's a huge signal that your website's better than someone else's.
With certifications from Google, Bing, SEMrush, and HubSpot, you're always learning. How do you stay updated on the latest marketing trends, and how do you decide which ones to implement for your clients?
To be honest, a lot of these unfortunately have to do with the constraints of the clients. So for me, it's more like we are constantly, I give you an example. I think almost every week we're reviewing or trialing anywhere between 2 to 3 tools. So one of the philosophies that we have at Find Your Audience is I don't ever believe that someone isn't going to make a better widget. So I always want to see if there is a better widget. Sometimes that's useful because our clients are capable of using it. Sometimes we're constrained to, HubSpot or Salesforce. So I think for me, how I stay above trends is just we're constantly trying new tools, and we constantly expect that someone will see a competitor or see a legacy player like HubSpot. They'll take a function that HubSpot does and do it 10 times better. And sometimes for our smaller clients, that's far more important than the entire suite. And so therefore, we're able to offer that as a solution to them.
You often work at an operational level with your clients. How do you approach project management and marketing to ensure seamless execution from strategy to delivery?
We always start with product and vision first. And if we don't do that, it tends to be actually quite problematic. And then just in terms of project management, it's quite simple. We tend to run everything through Asana. We have very strict requirements around our SOPs for different products, whether it's content writing, SEM, SEO. So a lot of it is just really process and the use of a good project management tool like Asana.
As a leader in marketing operations, how do you define success in your teams? And what leadership strategies do you use to foster growth and creativity?
Two things is one thing is we want to empower our employees. So the way we build out our management structure is really for people to be honest and self-report. So I think empowering our employees fosters success. And then honestly, just the only other thing is just managing deadlines. We really want our team just to meet deadlines. If they can't meet deadlines, that's typically an issue. And that's a collaborative thing, right? That's not necessarily always top down. Sometimes we collaborate on the date of when these deadlines are, but I think empowering my team to do what they're best at and empowering them to manage their time is probably the best way to foster success.
Well, thanks for giving us a lot of deep insights into marketing and your expertise in this domain. Was there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to highlight?
The only thing that I would like to highlight is I think marketing is going to become more important, and this is a self-serving statement. So give me a second here before you scrutinize me on this. I think the reality is that marketing is going to become more important because I think at the end of the day, there's more and more studies, and there's tons of studies that come out every single year that basically say that 20% of your market is actively looking for a product and 80% of it's not. And there's more studies showing how almost when they get to that 20%, before they even get to that, they've already made a decision on their favorite vendor. So if you think sales will constantly be your number one, no, sales is likely just re-engaging something that marketing has touched. And I think marketing will become more important in the future. I think having systems in place to allow customers to educate themselves at their own pace is going to become more important. So think product-led growth, but a little bit more just information out there. A great example of actually why I have my podcasts in the world, David, is if someone meets Nathan, it's like, go learn Nathan. I've got 45 podcasts out there. Go see who I am as a person. And I think that's going to become more of a theme, and that means more marketing. So I always think marketing sometimes gets the short end of the stick, but I think people are going to start recognizing that it's going to become more and more important, especially in the next couple of years.
Find your audience online. Findyouraudience.online is the website. Is there anywhere you'd like to point us besides that?
Honestly, you can just go ahead and find me at like LinkedIn. I should be the only Nathan Yeung marketing guy on there, but if you don't see me, let me know. But yeah, that's probably the two places that people can find me: www.findyouraudience.online or on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.